session. Let's unmic yours and let me do an introduction and I'll give the mic to you. All right. Distinguished participants, welcome. This is the Zero Build 2020 Forum. It's a beautiful day outside, so I hope we still have some participation. So it's the last day of the forum, and we have had very nice presentations, and I had a chance to follow some of them, and I benefited a lot from them, and I thank the organization committee out of that. We're going to talk about digitalization in the distributed energy in the buildings, dispersed energy in the buildings. I will have a small introduction and we'll have 70 minutes. And then we will have 20 minutes for Q&A. Let me talk about myself. My name is Kamil Çağatay Bayındır, was born in Bolu in 1973. I studied in Middle East Technical University in undergrad and master's, and then I started working as a research assistant in the same school, and I worked in private sector in Şişecam Sabancı and Erdemir groups. I worked in the maintenance, operation and management of the energy side of these groups, and then I got back to academia. Since 2009, I am in academia. I'm at Çukurova. I was at Çukurova University. Now I am at Yıldırım Bayezid University in Ankara. Power quality and grid integration of renewable energy and management, power electronics, transmission and distribution implementations. This is what I am working on. And academic studies and advisory is not only what I do. I am also the president, the chairman of Digitalization in the Energy Association. And I'm trying to serve my country through these areas. And we founded our association recently, and we are moving on with our activities. Our session, as I mentioned, is digitalization in energy and the distributed production. We have two valuable panelists, Dr. Cihad Terzioğlu and Dr. Alper Terciyanlı. Yeah, academics tend to speak a lot, but I won't do that. So if I start talking, I can really eat up the whole panel myself. So I'll yield the floor to our panelists. And before, I'd like to invite Dr. Cihad Terzioğlu for presentation. Let me just briefly introduce him. In 1987, he was born in Istanbul, married with one child, and he studied in Istanbul before university, and then he studied mathematics engineering at Yıldız Technical University. So we are all academics today. After undergrad education, he moved on in the mathematical engineering department of the same school on the financing of electronics engineering and real options. And then in mathematical engineering department, he worked on mathematical modeling on nuclear energy and modern approaches to mathematics. This was the title of his PhD dissertation. After 4 years of finance advisory, he has been in the upper management of renewable energy sector for about 4 years, and since 2009, he is the founding manager of 360 Energy Incorporated, and he is also the chairman. He's also in the Energy Commission of MÜSİAD. Welcome, I say, Dr. Cihad Terzioğlu, and the floor is yours. About 30-35 minutes. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. And I'd like to thank everyone who put this meeting together and who follow us today. And I also salute you, Dr. Alper. I'll take like half an hour of your time, and I'm going to talk about energy efficiency and digitalization, and I'm going to talk about what the buildings could add to us. I am a mathematical engineer. You know, in our trainings, you know, we are trained to think critically and analytically. And I work in energy finance and renewable energy, and I realized that it is all mathematics in energy financing, and then I moved on with my PhD dissertation. So I didn't work in academia, so I am also dealing with the issues of my own company, 360 Energy. I am also a member of Energy Committee of MÜSİAD, and it is in both in academic and NGO terms, civil society terms, you know, energy efficiency and renewable energy. This is what I have personally been involved, and I'm trying to bring it together with digitalization for sustainability purposes. You know, sustainability has two. I'm trying to make it. I'm working on how to make it sustainable, and I know you both you have a lot of know-how, and please forgive me if I slip my tongue. The issue that I'm going to talk about during the pandemics, we put together a book. So it's a book chapter. I worked on that during pandemic. So the sources that I used are accessible over the internet. What I want to say is the energy efficiency and digitalization, putting them together, you know, contributing to energy efficiency and reducing carbon emission and increasing employment. How can we make all this sustainable? You know, to make something sustainable, you have to spread it across the base. As of 2017, the economic transformation that the world went through affected the energy sector as well. And we can count trade wars in this regard. You know, between the two superpowers, the trade wars affected the other countries as well. And these trade wars created record falls in certain products. And meeting pandemic, this basically brought a unique period. You know, we have low prices on important goods, and there was a decrease in demand as well. So this is what made it unique. So why did the demand decrease despite the low prices? You know, the inaction as a decision made by the government and the reduction of economic activities. What I mean by that is a trade both at national and international scale, partial or full quarantine lockdown implementations. And when we put this together with the inertia of people, you know, there was a serious decrease in the demand of natural gas and other energy sources. So we were already in a tense period. The world was basically changing its shell. You know, at the beginning of 2020, it started in China, and it affected Japan, France, United States, like many other countries. So in commercial terms, 60% of the global GDP and more than 40% of the global trade, these 5 countries that I mentioned, these countries constitute that, and once the pandemic spread across these countries, things started to change in the world. So in a period of change like that, and with your valuable contribution as academics, with global changes, the trend of digitalization, looking for digital solutions, it reflected itself on energy sector. These two major effects gathered together. Just like the fusion reaction in nuclear, this happened. So that was a decrease in both prices and demand. And on the other side, there's digitalization solutions are introduced into the market. In such an atmosphere, the decrease in demand and prices in Turkey and global, this basically delayed the investment. The players in petroleum and gas sector had decreased income, and the finance by the public authorities also decreased, and this started affecting the investment on renewable energy and energy efficiency. And as you would agree, investment on these areas are pioneered by governments, and they move forward with government incentives. This economic this situation affected the globe more than 2008 crisis, and the investment on energy efficiency and renewable energy and petroleum and gas, well, it affected investment on these areas, and then we started having issues of employment. Remember, after the global crisis of 2008, after the decrease of the petroleum prices, after the tension between the Saudi Arabia and the United States, there was an employment deficit in Texas, only more than 160,000. Many gas companies applied for bankruptcy, so this affected employment. So indirectly related to that, the renewable energy and energy efficiency investments have been affected by this overall situation as well. And this also affects the title of this forum as well. It had an influence on clean energy. So as professionals of sector and academics in this area, we should find a solution to respond to three basic questions at the same time. First of all, it should increase the investment. Second, the cycle of clean energy, the transformation of clean energy should be accelerated. And third, doing clean energy, we should not disregard growth and employment. So it should bring increase in these areas as well. In our article, we were looking for solution in all these issues. So I started moving into digitalization in energy sector, especially services in the buildings. We should trigger employment, and we should basically increase the clean energy transformation, and that's what I want to talk about today. We're talking about a unique period, and it's not really an easy period. We're going through a period where energy giants are also going through a crisis. There's immense decrease in prices, and sometimes extraction cost is higher than the prices. So both psychologically and financially, they basically means that our sector is not growing. It is basically going through a narrowing, a depression. So in terms of climate change and carbon emissions, we have good pictures in Turkey and in some regions of China where there's a huge problem with air quality. In many parts of the world, what kind of a world are we going to have? You know, this is what we had a chance to observe. You know, Mr. Fatih, the World Energy Commission president, has an article on that as well, and he addresses the same issue. So we witnessed a demo, and if we accelerate the transformation in clean energy, and without disregarding the economic growth and employment, this is what we will see. This is the kind of world that we desire. You know, I wake up with the chirpings of the birds in the morning, and I didn't really have that back in the time. We know that this transformation is temporary. We know that since we have this demo, you know, how beautiful the nature is, we can basically convince people how to make it sustainable. And this forum is kind of giving this a go, giving this an opportunity. And if you look into its effect on the energy sector, you know, there was more than 10% narrowing in the transportation sector, and this brought partial decline in prices. And we also saw some negative prices in petroleum, and then the countries agreed, but still the fall was more than expected. Looking into the natural gas sector, the natural gas, since it's not really used much in transportation, it was affected less than petroleum, but there was a 5% decrease expected. And the narrowing on the demand, you know, let's compare it with the same narrowing in 2009, you know, after the global crisis of 2008. The narrowing back in the time was just 2%. Today, we're talking about 5% narrowing. So in terms of percentage, the numbers look small, but they are hugely important in terms of the experience that the world is going through. So in terms of renewable energy, as I said, you know, they are financed and pioneered by governments. So in an atmosphere where the state economies are directly affected, so in relative terms, there was a slowdown in investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency. But there is also another effect on these two areas. You know, the global supply chains were also affected. You know, at the center lies the renewable energy investments led by solar energy and onshore, offshore wind energy, and other sources of renewable energy are in the central position now in terms of renewable energy. So most of the investment in these areas, you know, the supply chains, for example, in the wind, it is the competition is between Europe and China. In solar, you know, the European continent almost withdrew from the supply chain. China is rising. Turkey is also rising with its new factories. So this affected the supply chain as well. So in a lockdown period like that, where social activities decreased, economic growth slowed down, and the trade wars are going on. So the only effect is not financial or fiscal effect. You know, alongside that, even if you say you have money and you're not really affected by the crisis, you cannot really say that, because there are problems with the supply chain, especially in the wind energy. Supervisors cannot travel, and some critical equipment are stuck in the ports. And even if the ports are open, the transportation, international transportation, decreased. So in economic and financial effect, alongside with that, the supply chain was also affected. Despite all that, renewable energy is less affected than petroleum and gas. In the first quarter of 2020, according to the data of International Energy Agency, it increased to 28% from 26% of 2019. So it maintained its relative weight. So it's an An important decision is awaiting us as of 2020. The Green Deal of European Union. The investment in renewable energy, the investments in energy efficiency. They are very important, and EU is just reminding us this. So renewable energy was affected as such. So let's talk about clean energy and climate change. So in terms of clean energy, we should move away from the fossil fuel in terms of production and consumption, and we should move into other directions with less intensity of energy and less carbon emission. So at this point, I'd like to share my screen. On the screen, we see a graph, and this graph was shared by International Energy Agency. It is showing the fluctuations in the international energy demand. If you look at the last 90 years, after Great Depression, the Second World War, the first and second oil shock, and global financial crisis of 2010, the biggest narrowing here took place with this crisis that we are going through. After the Spanish flu, we are talking about the biggest narrowing, and it coincided with what? It has a more important effect than the Second World War and Spanish flu, because it coincided at a period that has high intensity of electrification. We are going through a period where we depend on electricity very much. So day by day, in buildings and in our daily life, we use more electric appliances, so we need electricity more. So I believe after the Great Depression, it will have an effect on the system beyond Great Depression. So let me show you a second graph. This narrowing, let's look into its effect on climate change. These are, again, this graph is provided by an international energy agency again. You see the decrease in carbon emission. You see in terms of gigatons. And see, there is a much more significant decrease than the Second World War's decrease in terms of carbon emission, since we are more electrified compared to the Second World War in terms of our daily life. So, and this indicates that we are going through an important period, and every decision that we make, every step that we take, they have a huge coefficient effect on the future. So this is why I wanted to show these two graphs. What is the solution then? The solution is recognizing new solutions and new technologies in energy sector and rendering them sustainable. So new technologies in energy sector, I have two experts of the field now. We're talking about digitalization in energy, as you see in EDİDER association, carbon catch, batteries, smart grids, systems and houses, data analytics and management of data and management of demand. So there is a broad framework of digital solutions. First of all, we should see that we are able to bring these energies with digitalization. And when I was working for my article on blockchain, I saw a lot of solutions, very concrete and profitable examples are there. And I recommend our audience to look into that, because once you look into that, profitable global examples do exist, and such examples exist at national scale in Turkey as well. So What does this tell us? As experts and volunteers of the sector, we can basically integrate digital implementation onto energy sector. We're not behind the world in this regard. As you see, we are competing with the world in the sector. So with this adaptability that we have, like big textile companies were converted into mass producing companies, for example. If we use such a flexibility, adaptability into the energy sector, we can do this transformation. So the aim with this clean energy transformation, well, this makes it possible through dispersing it at the base level. It's the same with economy and culture and in other fields. Energy efficiency, clean energy transformation, and especially in buildings and services, to make it sustainable, we have to disperse it. We have to promote it at the base level. I'm not talking about, of course, we will start with the compounds in Istanbul and Ankara, but I'm talking about the 7 regions and 81 provinces of Turkey. So this is what I mean by dispersing it at the base. This is the only way to success. When we say energy efficiency implementations, there's also one more opportunity, and let me just go back to the beginning. We should increase the investments, and government incentive is important here, and we should accelerate the clean energy transformation. And the third, we should not disregard employment and economic growth, especially in countries like us. The concern on employment would be more important in decision making. So as of today, the problem that Europe is going through, every indicator is showing that Europe is headed towards a more difficult time, especially the issue of unemployment. They will face difficult and different problems. And as Turkey, we should prioritize employment. And one of the most important problems that we will face is this. You want clean energy transformation, it should be incentivized, but what would be its effect on employment? The existing investment on petroleum and gas, it has a much more boosting effect on the employment, but the renewable energy doesn't have that much of an incentive. So this is what we face, and this is what we will keep facing. So we have to have an answer before we get the question. And in the articles that I put together, and I also noted the methodology that I used, and with those methodologies, it has a positive effect on employment. As you know very well, if we disperse it in buildings and services, it has an unprecedented effect. As Mr. Fatih put together in his article, the president of International Energy Association, the energy efficiency, every $1 million that we spend on that would almost $60,000 of that reflect on employment. Another one is that if you do the same amount of investment on petroleum and gas, if you have the coefficient of 2.6 in energy and in gas and petroleum, you have more than 7 here. So we have 5 more score here. So the energy efficiency investment boost employment. Let me give you examples from Turkish case. From the measures of, let's see one measure of energy efficiency, insulation. How many buildings do need insulation in Turkey? Thousands, especially, in the last year, Mr. President had many presidential decrees on that. Maybe we would wait for a couple years to have such decisions from Parliament. So in the existing system, we take such decisions in a very fast manner. So this decree basically stipulates that the public buildings have to be energy efficient. You have to do your studies, and until 2020, you should do a certain amount of investment, the presidential decree says. How then? With energy performance contracts, agreements, you know, with, so it brings a modern way to bypass the bureaucratic slowdown. So we will see the effect of this starting from the public buildings. You know, we will have effects from the private life. You know, my company has conducted like a couple of these implementations as well, but we would consider public sector to be away from that, you know, like schools, ministerial buildings, governorates, and, you know, energy efficiency implementations, you know, they would feed engineering, for example. The projects are going to be drawn, advisory, construction sector, the provision of the material, and then the implementation sector, you know, the workforce and engineers, and service sector. Basically, energy efficiency, especially in buildings and services, it is going to contribute to employment. I know that you have studies on that, you know, digitalization implementations, you know, smart cities, smart buildings, and optimization of distribution systems, and evaluation of the data. You know, these things basically require, there's a perception that they require more computational power, but less manpower, but it's not like that. So there is going to be a sustainable employment from that. So to wrap it up, we are going through an electrified period. We need more electric vehicles ever more, and we're going through a test at a time like that. And the name of this test is the climate change, transformation of energy, and for some others it is conducting our responsibility for the next generations. But to pass this test, we have seen its trailer, we have seen its demo, you know, in this pandemic, that we saw a cleaner environment. So we can do this sustainable by energy efficiency and digitalization. Dr. Cihad, thank you very much. We enjoyed your presentation. We'd like to listen to you longer, but we have time restrictions. I hope we will have further chances of communication. I am an engineer, and it looks like you look into the issue from more a fiscal perspective. So I will have certain questions after listening to Alper, because this issue is important. It's important for our country, and you touched upon many dimensions of the issue, you know, efficiency, electrification. It is an important issue. After listening to Mr. Alper, let's just discuss the issue a little more detail. I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Alper Terciyanlı now, but let me introduce him before.
Well, I actually know him from the undergraduate times. His bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees have been taken from Middle East Technical University, Electricity Engineering, and then he worked as the senior researcher in Turkish Scientific Institute, and he coordinated many projects for energy sustainability and energy monitoring. He is a very valuable person. He is the professor of many of us. As of 2012, he has been working for Inavitas as the CEO and the co-founder, and he worked as the R&D director until 2018, and he is the CEOs of two companies, Inavitas and Enox. And distribution systems, power quality, and energy IoT are among the courses that he gives and lectures to university students. Mr. Terciyanlı is also one of the partakers in the foundation of Energy Digitalization Society, and his presentation is titled Digitalization in Energy and Distributed Energy in Buildings. Without further ado, I'd like to invite him to deliver his presentation. The floor is yours. Thank you so much, Professor, for this kind introduction and for creating these opportunities for us. I would like to thank you and the organizing committee of Zero Build Forum. And I'd like to say good Sunday to all of you. And we listened by enjoying the presentation of Mr. Cihad Terzioğlu. So my presentation will be focusing on the side of digitalization of the energy. And after hearing the presentation of Mr. Terzioğlu, I understood that I have taken the right decision. I will present you certain figures and statistics, and then I will try to explain where the distributed energy is heading towards. So with your permission, let me share my screen with you. I believe you can see my screen right now. Unfortunately, we cannot see the screen yet. Okay. Okay, right now we can see your screen clearly. Well, I will start speaking about the digitalization of the issue. And there was a very important point that the previous speaker has underlined. This new era, which focuses on the generators and also the consumers, will be an era where Turkey will compete with many other countries, and we can even assert that Turkey is well ahead of many countries during this paradigm change. Because, as you know, in this era, the prosumers will be at the core of this era. Of course, distributed energy sources and generation resources will bring about certain changes to our lives. Well, digitalization changed the perception, especially after coronavirus crisis. It is not anymore a definition that we have to underline its importance. So it is really important for all of us. So we don't have to exert lots of efforts to explain and describe digitalization, because pandemic, the outbreak, one of the positive sides of the pandemic is to show us the importance of digitalization, because at the end of the day we can say that the ICT has digitalized the whole process. On the side of digitalization, there are three important pillars. One of them is data, the other one is analytics, and in order to analyze the data, we should collect data from somewhere, so connectivity matters. The advancements in the sensor technology and the communication technology indeed are the main components for the realization of digitalization in many sectors, including but not limited to energy sector. For the last 10 years, there has been a great investment for digitalization of the energy sector. This is a report coming from the World Energy Agency. You can see that the investments for the digitalization of energy in the global scale is more than the energy investments of the India. So those investments are more than the investments done for the power plants. And it is increasing every passing year. And we also see that annually there has been a 20% of increase for the digitalization of energy. This also brings along many other opportunities because the data is increasing. We collect many data and we have to create value out of this data. There is a mechanism which feeds us. Data actually provides us lots of information, but we are spending lots of money for the data. But collecting data only and not turning it to valuable information will be against the nature of the system. Here you can see that the data which has been collected only in the year of 2017 is more than the data which has been collected and analyzed until that very year. And there is a huge potential of transforming the energy services. Together with the digitalization, the prosumers will be at the center of this issue. So we should be opting for an approach and infrastructure where the flexibility will be protected and we will enable the demand response and demand side management. So we will be managing the load on the demand side, and at the same time we will use batteries, PVs and EV chargers, and integrating them into the technology will change the rules of the game definitely. And digitalization will come into play at that really point. I also would like to underline once again, as this transformation process goes on, and when we analyze the green energy transformation, will be the enabler, as it is called in English. So in order to enable this transformation, we have to integrate the digital technologies into our lives. Forecasting the energy demands, managing it on real time, and creating value out of those data will be inevitable. What kind of a potential expects us? This is a graphic from the previous report. Until 2040, the cumulative energy efficiency potential in building is 65 petawatts per hour. So this equals to the total energy consumption that is being done until today. When we analyze different sub-items like residential and non-residential, we also realize that the energy savings in the residential buildings is quite high, and it has the same level of potential like non-residential buildings. It's a huge potential, and in order to materialize this potential and make it sustainable, we should enable the digitalization. Well, why residential buildings have such a huge potential? Because the transformation in the electronic appliances will take place as well. For example, the green bar is increasing, but the blue bar is decreasing. The green bar shows us the smart appliances which will be connected to the grid. As the use of smart appliances increase, their electricity consumption will increase, but since they are connected devices to the network, we will be able to manage them. Of course, they will be connected to the grid. Well, the distribution grid is just like the highways. We also have vehicles on that highway, but the infrastructure should be well prepared. This unidirectional distribution network will evolve itself, has already actually evolved itself to a bidirectional digital grid. The energy efficiency applications are taking place on the edges of this grid, and with the use of ICT technologies much more frequently in this sector, we see a bidirectional flow in the energy distribution and the information flow. So this new structure and bidirectional information flow is the enabler of this transformation. Well, there is the supply and demand side of the issue. In the past, the demand was also inflexible. We only had the end users, but right now those end users are also the producers, and they are storing the energy, and they have a say in terms of their energy consumption, and they also can provide opportunities to the generators. In the past, the supply side was centralized, but right now we have the distributed sources. So we right now started to have a decentralized structure. This leads us from unidirectional non-communicating system to a bidirectional communicating system, and together with PV and batteries, the whole content of this energy and information flow is changing as well. And of course, the emerging technologies, blockchain and data analytics, such kind of developments in the field of ICT advanced this process even further and made it much more safe and secure to many stakeholders, at the same time providing them value-added solutions. Well, the costs of enablers are getting cheaper and cheaper to implement. For example, the orange arrow shows us the sensor prices, and the blue arrow shows us the utility prices. The green part shows us the EV batteries. The red arrow shows us the prices of smart appliances, and the dark blue arrow shows us the smart meters and the reduction in their prices. As they are getting cheaper and cheaper, they are disseminated even more, and as they are disseminated even more, the data collected from there will be converted to information and knowledge, and it will be beneficial for all stakeholders. So as a result, as we approach to this problem from our perspective, all stakeholders should be receiving a share from this value, and those should be distributed in a just and democratic manner. And we should actually plan our further steps carefully. When I say distributed energy resources, I don't mean only the generators, but EV and batteries, EV panels and batteries are also included, because we should also underline the importance of the differences between our daily usage and the centralized usage. This is a report coming from International Energy Agency. For small-scale PV by 2040, 1 terawatts of energy production will be carried out by those distributed energy resources. In the worst-case scenario, 150 million, but with a good scenario, 500 million electricity vehicles will be produced, and 300 or 400 megawatts of capacity will be used for charging those electric vehicles. But we also see that there is a huge increase for the demands, which will be doubled. So when I say that Turkey is not actually following from behind, if not ahead in certain points, but in terms of the demand management, we are unfortunately following from behind. I mean, the regulations and the legislation should be shaped in order to open the pathway for further innovation. Of course, the renewable energy resources will be quite important. It will increase, but it will also bring along many problems as well. Well, electricity vehicles will be used much more. The demand side involvement and management will be strengthened. This means that the energy will be accessed much more safely and much more cheaper, and the value will be shared in a more transparent and just and fair manner by the different stakeholders. I am sure that you have seen this chart in many different presentations. This is the Californian changing load profiles, and in the literature it is called as the duck profile, because as the distributed energy resources increase and renewable energy resources are increasing, the demand load leads to the peak at the night time. With the increase of PV panels, the demand load will be at the lowest level. So at the night time, you can see that the demand load will reach to peak levels. Well, for 2012 and 2013, these were actually the calculated and forecasted figures, but they were realized as they were forecasted. By increasing the distributed energy resources and renewable energy resources, we will be changing the demand load, and we should be able to manage it. So at the end of the day, it's really important to decide which energy resources will be used, how and when. And we can also understand from this report that without any level of flexibility, or in another saying, if we do not manage the energy generated out of distributed energy resources, then we'll have a problem. You can manage the demand and you can manage the supply. If we do not do it, 85 terawatts per hour of an energy will be curtailed. So we wouldn't be able to produce it, although we could. But if we use the demand response management, a flexible capacity will be created. So these distributed energy resources will be managed. So at least 65 terawatts per hour of extra energy will be produced from renewable energy resources. Zero build is the theme of this conference. And we have underlined the importance of energy production from renewable energy resources. The distributed energy production will be much more common, especially with the rooftop applications. And in order to make the utmost efficiency out of them, the digital technology and the management of the retail companies will be highly important so that no energy will be wasted. Well, demand response is one of the most important definition because we will create some additional capacity. If we take a look what is happening all around the world, we will realize that Turkey has important applications, but the use of digital technologies for the energy sector shows us that important steps are being taken, and demand response and demand management is one of them. Because as we are disseminating those applications, we are creating a capacity which can be monitored and which can be managed, and it will create some additional flexible capacity. So the consumers will be using the storage technology or generation technology, and as a result, the demand response characteristics will be changed. As a result, we will be able to change our demand loads. On the left-hand side, there is no flexible management. I mean, digital technologies are not used. The batteries are not involved. This green lines shows us the amount of energy which is being curtailed. But on the right-hand side, we see the demand response or battery technologies. In certain hours, the consumption will be reduced, and the consumption is increased, especially during the times when there is an overproduction. As a result, the utilization of the energy produced will be at the maximum level. This is really important, especially for Turkey, because Turkey has a remarkable potential in terms of the renewable energy resources. Both the energy that we produce from fossil fuels and the energy that we have from imports, their use will be reduced. So on a macro scale, the efficiency, energy efficiency of the Turkey will be improved. This is a report by 2016. I mean, most probably we should check the recent reports, but in 2016, when we take a look where we are heading towards, by 2040, we see that approximately 1 billion households and 11 billion smart appliances are expected to be contributing to this system. So as a result, 185 gigawatts of flexible capacity will be created, and 6,900 terawatts per hour of energy will be managed accordingly. This is a huge capacity, and it will provide additional values to many stakeholders. It will provide an additional value to the distribution companies. They will be tackling their technical problems. The end user will also pay less for energy per unit, and also the generators will be optimizing their costs per unit, and the energy generated out of the renewable energies will be used at the maximum level. This will definitely contribute to the whole system. It will provide a commercial benefit, but we have to increase the motivation on the end user side. The benefit to be obtained here should be distributed in a fair and just manner among all stakeholders. And, of course, the whole system should be operated in a transparent manner. Also, the safety and the security of the system in electricity and IT terms should be provided. That's why we need manageable structures. I briefly would like to speak about the term of aggregators, then I will wrapping up my speech. In order to make the most out of those developments, we are in need of aggregators. I mean, retail companies can most probably accomplish it, but we will also need small-scale structures, both on the side of generation, storage, and distribution. So those small units will come together and they aggregate, and this flexible capacity will be sold by those aggregators, and the extra benefit arising out of this process will be distributed to all stakeholders, as I told. And I presume this will be the point where we will need further regulations in the upcoming term. This will be the need if we want to boost up this process. Thank you so much, Mr. Alper. We have listened to two very valuable presentations. We can continue with the questions. There are certain opinions which have been shared with me. Gökşen Ak stated that the architecture and the engineering curriculum should be updated from scratch because the foundational education have changed already. So the climate changes are basic problem, the main problem. So the students should be educated accordingly by taking into consideration those problems. Thank you so much. We agree with you, and I'll have certain questions. If you like, let's start with Mr. Cihad. You also mentioned, I mean, I am an engineer, and Mr. Alper is an engineer as well, and he follows the economy much more closely. And you are on the financial side of the issue. As an academician, why am I here in this meeting? Because we would like to contribute to our country in certain topics. Well, our country has a huge current account deficit, and energy is one of the biggest contributors. As you know, the biggest problems of the Turkey arises out of those energy issues like Eastern Mediterranean, Black Sea, and etc. Well, the petroleum products were very important, but as of today, we know that the natural gas will be really important, and I mean, based on that information, we can really understand what is going on in the Eastern Mediterranean. But renewable energy is also important. Why? We cannot set up the whole grid based on the renewable energy. I mean, let's put the PV panels to the rooftops and let's use the wind turbines. But at the end of the day, the whole problem is about finding the finance. I mean, we can develop our own technology and prioritize the renewable energy resources, and we can actually place, wind turbines and PV panels everywhere. Or there are certain studies in which the wind turbines and the PV panels are installed more than necessary because their productions are not stable. As a result, managing the grid will be really hard. So digitalization is not a fantasy, it is actually a need. So we have to think about those issues, and we can, accept them as a priority. But at the end of the day, the finance will be the main bottleneck. How will we solve the issue of finance?
It's not very easy to answer that, but as you all know, such transformation have technical and management side, and they have economic and political sides, dimensions. So we can get over these issues with the things that Alper mentioned. If we transition into the renewable energy, with the know-how and the expertise that we have, we can tackle its technical side. The managerial side, the administrative side, we can solve that in the middle one as well. Cutting off the communication with your neighbors should also be evaluated, but this is basically primarily a matter of finance. Allocating the finance at the right time in the right place. This is an issue that the decision makers will have to tackle. So the financing in the right place in the right time. I am a leading figure in a student club at Yıldız Technical University. The solar energy is on the rise across the world, but in Turkey we didn't have a legislation back in the time. And as students, we went to our Minister of Energy, Mr. Taner Yıldız, and I asked, why don't we open all the doors? Why don't we start right away? He said something very important that I understand better now. I talked to him in 2009. In 2009, if we set out to actualize the whole potential, 1,000 megawatts would be, 500,000 euros. So we would have like 110% import, Funding the R&D is going to have a huge cost as well. So Turkey did not look into the issue just through the lens of having a specific technology. We should move when we have the technology inside the country. So if we don't add up on top of the technology that we have, we'll just remain as consumers. Even if we are funded by international funds, we're not really adding on top of this. We're not making it ours. Another important issue is the security. You know, I don't get uranium, coal, petroleum, gas, you know. I just would have the wind and sun, and it sounds all very good, very poetic, but, you know, there is also the cybersecurity issue that we have. You know, it's beyond protection. We should just destroy potential threats as well. So we should basically improve, move forward. So administrative, technical, political, and economically, when we are ready, the stage is going to be ready for the scene that we want to act. As Turkey, I believe we prepared that scenario well, and Turkey is going to be better on that issue in the future. We all strive for that, and there's a significant potential and there's opportunities, you know, to serve our country and, you know, using the technology that we developed in our country and exporting it. We have opportunities in both senses. Let me just ask you one more question and I'll move on with Alper. You are the Chief of Energy and Mining Committee in MÜSİAD, an important NGO, business association. Do you have anything going on that matter as well? You know, we have an energy efficiency and digitalization works, and in digitalization, we work closely with the business people and the companies, and we participate in international associations and international meetings, and we talk about energy and digitalization. And I wanted to have a report, you know, for accountability purposes, you know. I wanted to have a report for my family as well, you know, in terms of where I spend my time. So we talked about energy efficiency and digitalization in international forums and conferences, and with international experts and public administrators and business people. We talked about that. We talked a lot. Did we take concrete steps? Well, we have established companies. We have grown the existing ones, and we have startups. And with the participation of our dear Mr. President, and we try to bring people together. I think 2019 was fruitful in this regard, and as of now, to all of our members, you know, what kind of opportunities can be provided to our members? This is what we are looking into it. You know, when pandemic spread Iran and Greece, for example, I was having a meeting I was organizing a meeting at MÜSİAD. We invited industrialists, and we have conducted presentations on energy efficiency. You know, making the watts in definite in energy efficiency. This is what we talked about. We talked about certain software in terms of energy efficiency. You know, it involved steam boilers and pressured boilers and similar things. We gave examples, we talked about results, and we tried to make new legislation sensible for them. So we had more participation from non-members, because it's a matter that is basically a matter for everyone. This is something that we organized. Thank you very much. We wish you success. I wish we have a face-to-face after pandemic and work together. And thank you very much. It was a nice presentation, Alper, and there are significant opportunities. The energy sector is a highly regulated sector. In terms of digitalization, how do you see the legislation, where we're headed? Your thoughts on that? In Turkey, compared to its past, I think we are going fast. We're faster than before in many fields in energy, especially in the implementation of recent technologies, innovations. And regulations basically should be done in order to pave the way for innovations. So in this regard, there is a support in the energy ministry, and I'd like to thank our dear minister. They took right steps, and I believe complementary steps are planned as well. Of course, there are more steps to be taken. They basically have a draft legislation on that, and they talked about demand collectors. How to secure cyber, how to guarantee cybersecurity in electric and cyber side. Of course, there's the investment time. So both economical, technical, and legislative support, they should go simultaneously. The most important issue here is that legal regulations should not prevent innovation. Once we get this done, the issue develops in its own pace. On the demand side, we have an office in Australia, and Australia has many examples. With blockchain and demand side participation, some companies make money out of that. We see from the practices that there is no legislation yet, but there's a state authority which allows certain companies function in the market without having a regulation. So we don't have regulation. We don't need regulation for everything, or sometimes, just pave its way with a simple regulation and then do the detailed regulation later. So that could be, such steps could be taken. And in this regard, the following developments will be fruitful because we have nice steps taken. All right, thank you. Time is almost up, and I'd like to ask you one more question to each. You are the Secretary General of the association, so what kind of work are you doing? What is your agenda? What is up in the agenda? The Energy Association that we have, we established together with you, actually. We want to put the implementations into practice that enable digitalization further. So we try to create a synergy between public authorities, the private sector, and civil society. So there was no single structure that was working on digitalization. So I believe in this regard, our association is filling an important gap. And in the pandemic process, one of the things that we learned, synergy is very important. You know, collaboration is important. And in this regard, our association to companies, NGOs, individuals, well, we would basically bring them together to raise awareness and, you know, giving hand in hand in a technological leap forward to be able to compete globally. This is what we are trying to do. And for this, on the public authority side and on the side of private sector, we're trying to raise awareness. And synergy is what I care most about. So there are many companies working in the sector. They have strong muscles, and some muscles are complementary muscles. And if we can bring them together, the thing is that we don't have to aim the same commercial target, but we can still work together. Turkey is a small market, and once you digitalize energy, you know, it's going to be much easier for these products to be brought up to the global. So in the global market, you know, with cooperation, we would bring these strong muscles together and present the local and national solutions to the global audience. So I was very excited when I was establishing the association, but pandemic kept us away. You know, in our culture, we work closely, but this is how we feel. We increased our activities and we conducted a good activity, and it basically indicated what we needed in the sector in Turkey. In this regard, just like Zero Build, this, you know, Zero Build is filling an important gap as well. So we have to throw one stone into this well. As we all do that, this well is going to be filled. You know, we should not throw stones to each other. We should throw them into the well. So with this perspective, like my association and the NGO that Jihad is a part of, they are working selflessly, and the contribution of everyone is important in this regard. Thank you very much, Mr. Alper. It was a joyful conversation. We had a chance to meet Dr. Jihad, and thank you very much. We are at the end of our time, and I hope our audience enjoyed the meeting and benefited from it as well. Thank you very much. And let's call it a day. That would be the end of this session now. And have a good holiday. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.